Ring's on.
Hey, Jim, can you hear me?
I
Yes,
can.
I got you.
Yes.
This is Jim Ring.
Good to see you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, guys.
Likewise.
Jim, I'm in your neck of the woods.
Really?
We have the family down here in Disney.
So we are streaming, and so they can hear, stream can hear the chatter right now. So let's contain the chatter until the meeting starts.
Happy holidays, Bill.
Yep. You got grandmas. Grandma's floating around there.
That banner, a shared screen.
Playing the lottery later. Can I get you?
Every morning, it's the first thing I do, you know, I got to check the email and see what has been canceled.
Oh, you checking your lottery, you know?
There's a picture. Not Angela. Is it
We have-
300?
No, full time. But
How many admin?
it varies, but it's normally if you took on adjuncts.
What we're saying the meeting will begin shortly screen. Should we just start talking?
So-
You'll have to- how are we doing?
So we have
Okay,
10,
hey, Matt,
About 10 to 1.
50.
sir, just call the meeting to order and Bill will go live. So
Okay.
since we're just called the meeting to order, I think he said he'll transition.
Okay, let's say, I'm hoping this works, but I think this is Tom Washington. I'll call the meeting to order. And just double check to see whether those on the screen and by video are hearing us here in Lexington.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Good. Well, again, sorry for the late delay and getting started here, but welcome everybody, both those on the board and those that are visiting with us. We very much appreciate you joining, especially for these meetings that are a little off sequence. So appreciate the time everybody's put into this. I want to certainly give a warm welcome to Kate Todd, our newest board member. I think Kate was sworn in a week or so ago. So Kate, welcome. I guess we skip orientation in your situation and jump right into the business at hand. But again, thank you very much for joining us on today's call.
Thank you.
And again, actually, I'll just share with you, there's a couple things we'll vote on. If you don't feel just because you haven't had the background and history, please don't hesitate to abstain, because I think again it's a little unfair to put you in a position to vote on something right from the start. So certainly don't hesitate to use that alternative if need be.
Thank you.
One other just quick housekeeping point I'd mention, and we've talked about this with the executive committee and with some who are on the board. With General Dominique's passing, we needed to make some decisions around certain committee assignments, especially around the executive committee and where he served, as well as his role as the chair of the nominating and governance committee. And as you know, we've asked Conrad Garcia to step in on a non-voting basis. And I talked about with the executive committee elevating Conrad to that position of seat at the executive committee as well as a nominating committee on a permanent basis. And so just wanted to inform the board of those actions. And with Kate joining, there were two other spots or three committees I was going to ask Kate to just basically fill in for General Dominique. So that would be the Cadet and Military Affairs Committee, the Audit, Finance and Planning Committee, and the Nom and Governance Committee. And all that I just said is actually outlined for you on page 57 of 64 in the board pack there. But again, these are things I think that shouldn't come as a surprise. We've talked about them, but I think just wanted to make it a formal and official decision there. So with that, the only other thing I'd move too quickly is the approval of the minutes. And can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Hey, Tom, this is huge. Just one point of housekeeping. Some of us, at least I can't join by video, says the host has disabled that function, which is fine. No one needs to see me, but the video doesn't seem to be working for a number of us.
Okay.
There we go. I think the host just fixed it.
All right, there we go. We've got the real thing. We had a photo of you before, actually, Hugh. So this is the live version's a little bit better. You looked a little bit, I don't know.
Younger.
You look very
Younger.
clear.
This is Kate and I'm in the same boat. I can't turn on the video.
Okay, we'll work on that. Sorry about that.
That's
Teddy
okay.
too.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, somebody will step out and see what we can do to make sure everyone's invited in by the video piece. So apologies.
We see you now, Kate.
Yeah. We're good. It's a gradual process, I guess, but we can hear everybody, so that's a good thing. And as long as you can hear us too as well, we'll just continue to push forward. So I think with that, I think Cedric, we pass things to you for the first few items here in the open session.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to all the board members on the virtual net. There's a couple topics that we plan to go through during the open session. And in a lot of ways, it is with the intent and purpose of closing out a couple of actions and updating the board on a couple of actions that took place back in the September board meeting. And so in the open session, you see the agenda. And so we'll just jump right into the strategic plan and the intent of the strategic plan brief. So if we could bring the strategic plan approval brief up, Bill, so that we can brief the board.
Yes, sir.
You all should have, based on what was submitted a few days ago on the box file, you ought to have a copy of the approval brief. If you don't, then let me know, but I want to be able to ensure that everybody has visual, the ability to see that visually. Okay. Again, this is a briefing that is intended to bring before the board a recommendation on approval of the strategic plan. We briefed the strategic plan back in the September board meeting. You also have, that was provided in the box files, the most updated revised version, which is represented as a final draft of the strategic plan. Based on the feedback that we received from a number of board members to include some direct engagement and communication by the primary authors of the document that were doing all the writing, Lee Rakes and Dallas Clark, as well as some external communications from myself. I want to quickly go through the things that are contained in the revisions to the strategic plan to make sure that they are acceptable changes to the board, and then we can get to the recommendation. So on slide 3, if you go to slide 3, you will see.
You're just on. You're going. I'm just going to give the electronic version. I think that's 33 of 64. You can go through the red line one.
Correct.
Yeah. So actually,
Correct.
for the board members, that would be. I think the red line version starts on 33.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
So no changes to the 5 strategic initiatives. If you go to slide 4, we'll talk about the substantive edits to the strategic plan. Slide 5 is the first. And so the recommendation coming from the board at the time in September was to emphasize controlling costs and operational excellence and efficiency, and make highlights of that in the remarks in the superintendent's letter. And so on the left side, you will see the language as it existed in the prior edited version. And then on the right side, you will see the more substantial edits that took place with the highlighted underlined piece, which makes direct reference to achieving operational excellence while being ever vigilant about year-over-year affordability for VMI families. And I will pause to see if there are any comments with respect to that language. I'll pause briefly and see if there are any board members that have any comments with respect to that language. Okay. The next slide number 6.
34. I'm sorry.
Is it 34?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry to do it to you, just so people on the line can follow you where you're trying to take us.
Okay, it is the slide that has the title suggestion, emphasize controlling costs and operational excellence and efficiency. Under the section titled recruit top cadets and boost success as an objective. The language was modified to include, rather than 3 strategies, 4 specific strategies. So a 4th strategy was added, and that strategy was intended to address that recommendation that talked about controlling costs, and stated that we must be exceptional in our fundraising and operational excellence, and the rest of the words And then it highlights or it encapsulates that those 4 efforts will benefit the entire VMI community, cadets, parents, guardians, faculty, and alumni. I'll pause to see if there are any questions from the board members. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next one. The next recommendation was to actually expand on what the vision would be for VMI as an institute to look like in 2039, emphasizing the fundamental elements of the VMI experience. This is under the vision guiding the process section. You will see on the left side, again, the words that existed before or during the September timeframe. And then you will see on the right side, the modified words based on input from various different board members. We have spelled out that we talk about growing and retaining the core size, retaining graduate cadets at rates that retaining and graduating cadets at rates that will rival the best institutions in the nation. We talk about the leadership model, and we struck a portion that talked about the goal or the objective of young men and women who would seek commission. And it was believed that those words might constrain us in such a way where that is, while it's a lofty goal, it may be an unachievable goal. And the real emphasis is on retaining the number of young men and women who seek to commission in the armed forces, keeping that at 50% or better, while increasing the number of young men and women who are looking to serve the nation in some other capacity, whether that is at the state level or whether that's at the federal level. And then the last part was a reinforcement of the time-honored fundamentals of the Institute, our single sanction honor system, being a military college, a regimental system, the class system that is intended to build and foster a esprit de corps, go back, for the Corps, and a commitment to preparing graduates to serve the nation. I'll pause there and see if there's any comments. Okay. The next is my slide 8. It's titled Recommendation to discuss how we accomplish the values of honor and resilience and improve the language used to describe excellence. And there were 3 sections under there. One is under honor, the second is under excellence, and the third is under resilience. And the wording that is down at the very bottom in red is additional language that is contained in this draft of the strategic plan to illuminate greater the importance of the honor system, academic excellence, as well as the importance of resilience and how we grow and develop young leaders. I'll pause and see if there are any comments there. Okay. Hearing nothing, I'll move to the recommendation, which was add an action quote in the section that was titled the plan, and it talks in detail about how the planning process that we undertook to develop the strategy. And so there's a quote that you see. It's contained in the document as well. I'll pause briefly there to see if there's any comments. Next. The suggestion was blend NCAA athletics with other leader development opportunities to streamline description of our products, what we produce in young men and women. In the red, you see the additional wording that talks about opportunities for cadets to hone their leadership skills, not only in NCAA athletics, but in other areas such as club sports, extracurricular activities, our academic clubs and our honor societies, and the Center for Leadership and Ethics programs, in addition to our regimental and class system where it's well known that leadership opportunities exist. And then the last part was a recommendation that we remove the words that have traditionally been used in reference to Jonathan Daniels, just because it just seemed out of place with respect to this particular section and what it was emphasizing. I'll pause there and see if there's any comments. Okay. The next suggestion was to make some revisions to the reference to graduate school. And so we went through, we looked at the language that existed. We reiterated that any undertaking for a graduate program would not be the first priority for the Institute. Undergraduate research and micro-credentialing and an examination of whether or not that makes sense for the Institute would likely be the first order of business. However, we think that there's value-added opportunity to explore continuing education and or the possibility of a graduate program, so long as it does not cause us to depart from the traditional aspects of the Institute's mission, culture, and traditions. I'll pause there and see if there's any comments.
So it's probably worth drawing attention to that first paragraph, because actually that's the heart of this, isn't it? Is actually how do we leverage the leadership model we have here, and that's it always comes back to that. We've got a set of skill sets and deliverables that how do we actually leverage that, and that's what we never want to lose, is that sort of unique leadership training model.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is, and throughout the work that's gone on, it has been on a recognition that we have a very, very unique, effective, and valued leadership model, and how and if we can do more with it for the benefit of our young men and women in the Corps. And so that's what it's been all about throughout the conversation. So I'll pause there and see if there are any comments. Okay, the next slide talks about the recommendation, which was it had to do with emphasizing the diverse bodies and areas from which young men and women come to go to college and come to go to college at VMI. And it was intended to do two things. Number one, to emphasize the nature of diversity in many, many different ways beyond any thinking that it talks specifically about race or gender. And then secondly, to put more emphasis on the fact that the value of that diversity is in how our graduates contribute to teams to make them better. And so the words are reflected in the red and talk about effective teamwork, about team cohesion and the leadership of teams. And then the strength of VMI and the environment being a character infused with individuals who are focused on achieving a common set of outcomes and results. You need to go back one slide, I believe, Bill. There we go. So I'll pause there and see if there are any comments. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to the next one. The next suggestion is to discuss the enhancement of communications and marketing. And you see the words that existed in the prior draft, all in black, and then down below, we talk about VMI's value through a broad external community of enhanced marketing through strategic communications and marketing efforts in a way to help us communicate our uniqueness, continually make the VMI brand recognizably valuable and important to leaders in the state and federal agencies, and to attract talented cadets, faculty, staff, and prominent organizations interested in hiring our graduates. I'll pause there and see if there are any comments.
Gonna roll.
Okay. The next suggestion is, again, placing emphasis in the words of the strategic plan that focus on teams and team building rather than individuals. You see the words there, and this was the section under foster esprit de corps, which was the fourth objective. And you see the words there highlighted in red that talk about performing in high performance teams as a member of the Corps. And also for the emphasis that cadets find their place within the Corps based on how they contribute and how they become a team member at the various different echelons of the Corps. And then the remaining words in the last paragraph, again, further emphasize the need to grow teams and to be a part of teams. I'll pause there and see if there are any comments. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next section. And this is just a summary of the next steps that we are looking to get. The first is obviously we're at the point where I will make a recommendation to the board about approval of the strategic plan. And then there's further work that's going to need to be done by the staff here to begin to come up with operational plans that are nested within this strategic plan and operationalizing by defining the key performance indicators, the key performance metrics that we will measure and assign to the various institute execs and their staffs, and how we will begin to track and monitor progress consistent with the strategic plan to get to the various different end states that are highlighted in the strategic plan. The plan calls for us to have the work of the metrics and the KPIs and the KPPs done to brief the board in the May board meeting. I'll pause there and see if there are any comments.
So does that also include then who's responsible? Because you obviously need to push this out of the organization. So we'll have a good line of sight in terms of where the responsibility lies and what the expectations of timing are.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There'll be timelines. There'll be those that are assigned primary responsibility. So OPRs and OCRs, coordinate responsibility and primary responsibility.
Jim Juster here. I've got one question related to KPIs.
Yeah.
When that's presented, you'll show KPIs, but you also show a history, like a 5-6 year history that showing how it relates to the proposed KPIs.
Yeah, we could take a look at that, Jim. And that assumes that there is a history, but yeah, absolutely, we can take a look at that.
That would be good. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, this is Ernie Edgar. Quick question on timing. So for the May board meeting, am I understanding that we'll actually be operating against the approved strategic plan by that point, or we'll still be waiting for the starting gun?
At the conclusion, we will begin to promulgate the strategic plan, Ernie, to and brief folks such as the alumni agency leadership. And we have already actually moved out on some things. So I think the answer is yes, we will have started. The measurements, however, we will not have necessarily codified, and we'll begin those after we brief and get the approval of those in May.
Okay, thank
you. Okay. Okay. The last slide is my recommendation. A lot of work has been done. There have been, I lost count of the number of iterations that we've done on this strategic plan. A lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of socialization of the document. And so to the board members and to the president of the board, my recommendation is that the board approve the strategic plan subject to any discussion that you all have. But my recommendation is that the strategic plan be approved so that work can begin on the development of the metrics and the operational plans, and to begin to discuss with the alumni agencies and other stakeholders how we begin to build on this plan through resourcing and other things. So subject to any questions, that concludes my brief.
Any final questions from the board members? Again, just on process, it's been a long process. We all know that, but I think, again, I think it's a reminder, this is a long-term plan. So this is not an annual event. This is our work. We've got this one out there.
Correct.
And So it was time well spent, and I'm sure it was, we had a number of back and forths which were healthy, but let me open it up. Any questions from the board members before we put it to a vote? I don't hear any questions. Can I have a board member move?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, maybe the best thing since we're on this format is anybody not in favor? So I think it sounds like we've got full approval then, I believe.
I would like to abstain just for the very reasons that stated at the beginning of the meeting and appreciate you all spent a long time on this.
Absolutely, Kay. I wanted to give you that latitude to start, so please,
Thank
you dropping in like this, so into this set of circumstances. So please, we'll reflect that in the vote count that you abstain.
Thank you.
Kate, we'll be prepared, when we bring you down for orientation. We'll be prepared to give you a full-blown, lay down on kind of the particulars of the strategic plan.
Terrific.
With you all anytime that you want, to ask questions or understand kind of how we went through the process.
Okay, again, well done. I think maybe we'll move to the next topic, which was the transgender policy and procedures, and maybe just I'll make an opening comment if that's all right, Cedric, before I pass it to you. I think as the full board knows, we had an executive committee a couple of weeks ago to use as a chance to talk about this issue, realizing there was no decisions to be made, as there are no decisions to be made today. But this is a very complex set of issues that we have to sort of navigate ourselves through. I think the executive committee gave some pretty strong feedback that, we need to do more work. We shouldn't, not that we were being hasty, but we need to do more work to better understand both the operational side of this decision and the legal side of that decision. So I would just say, Cedric, just to set today's discussion up, we'll get an update. Sure. But I think, again, this is a case where we're still very much in the feedback mode in terms of individuals on the board, in terms of their sense of things and next steps. But just to take the pressure off, no decision today. This is an update, but with that, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. So based on the briefing that took place to the XCOM on a draft policy for transgender, which would have affected a number of policies and the development of a standard set of operating procedures. It was the feedback that I got from the board president was to lay this out in such a way that the board could begin to look and see it in terms of a set of choices and then the risk associated with it based on a couple of different scenarios. So the Commandant has that task and has been working on that set of scenarios, and we will be prepared to brief that during the January board meeting. In addition, I have asked legal counsel Pat O'Leary to go through the existing law, both state and federal, and the existing model policies and any case law that might be out there with respect to the acceptance of transgender students and how that's applied, and be prepared to brief the board in January on what the existing laws and case laws say about those various different matters. And so the combination of both of those will allow us to then put before the board through the Military Affairs Committee the working draft of the transgender policy, the adjustments to the existing policies, GO 13 and GO 16, and the draft of the SOP procedures, so that then the Military Affairs Committee will have an ability to take a look at that, to ask questions, to make deliberations, to offer any type of guidance and direction, and then at the appropriate time, brief out to the full board kind of what the process is. And when the board makes the determination that they are ready to approve the policy, then the policy will be brought forward for approval.
And Cedric, I should have said in my opening comments too, the board members will see in the board pack beginning on page 58, a set of comments actually from certain individuals regarding transgender policy. So again, we all understand the complexity of all those decisions and the environment in which we're making them, but just again, didn't want it to go unnoticed, some of the feedback we've been getting from specifically some alumni and others. So just be
Sure.
sure that the board members do take a glance at that as we're not now, but as we consider the follow up. Go ahead.
So that concludes my update. Subject to any comments or questions from members of the board.
And sir,
yeah,
there was
just-
one comment added right before the meeting this morning. So that's in the portal.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim Juster here. Since our last board meeting, I can't tell you how much I've read on the subject and talked to people about this. It's a very complex subject, clearly. You know, as we go through the strategic plan, we talk about how rigorous, how challenging, how difficult, you know, it is to be a cadet, and how that's all meant to build strong leaders. And as I've researched transgenders, there's an incredibly high percentage of attempted suicides, some real instability that exists there that you know, in our environment could be very challenging to transgenders. So as we look at this policy in terms of a transgender that wants to enter our environment, I would hope that we're engaging some experts in this field to help us in developing those policies and procedures right at admissions at the very beginning, because you know, we want, as representatives of the state, we want to make sure safety exists for all cadets and anyone that's entering our system. So I think we need to look at that. And then the only other comment I've got is as we look at the law, and I would defer to the attorneys, to Pat and the other attorneys on the board. You know, I think because there's some ambiguity that currently exists as it relates to transgenders and the law, I think we need to establish what we think is best for VMI and for our environment going forward. And then if that is challenged by the law, then we fight that battle going forward all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. But those are a couple of things I think we need to look at. And I would invite any attorneys to weigh in here, because this is, you know, it's a legal issue as very much so, as much as anything else. But I don't think we can lose sight of the big picture in terms of being a VMI cadet is a very demanding, stressful, and challenging experience. And we know that transgenders coming in have an extremely high percentage of attempted suicides and other psychological issues. And so we need to be responsible to everybody as we move forward.
Jim, I think maybe maybe some of that may come up in the discussion we're about to have, especially on the legal side, but maybe I'll seize on one point you mentioned. I think reflecting back on the executive committee discussion we had, I think one of the things I shared with Cedric was, understandably so, a lot of the focus was on the transgender candidate. But the other thing I think you're alluding to is we need to think about the other 1,700 cadets in barracks too. So the balance between all of that needs to be put in the mix. And I don't think, Cedric, you're ready now to sort of put something in front of us firmly. But this is an important, you know, the other cadets is an important consideration too. And I think that's embedded in your comment, Jim. And I think that was, again, one of the takeaways we had from the conversation the other day is anytime we talk about this very delicate issue, there's two pieces to the puzzle in terms of stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. Exactly. We have to look at the entire core and what's good for the core. And we also have to weigh the rights of the individual that is considering entering this environment.
I think that's the path you're taking us down now.
Absolutely. And that was what was briefed during the XCOM, and it's going to be expanded upon with the scenarios. Again, during the XCOM, we clearly talked about the level of risk. We talked about the involvement of cadet input that had taken place predominantly from members of the cadet corps who are or have identified themselves as part of the LGBTQ community. And so we'll roll that back up again, as I said, to lay it out in terms of risk versus choices so that folks understand, and we'll make sure that there's a good, clear understanding of what current law says, and then the proposal that would be put forward is intended to comport with the law, and certainly if the view of the board is that we take on a more riskier proposition that might create certain challenges, that we understand that eyes wide open, and then those decisions are made, and then we prepare to do whatever is necessary as we get candidates and or we accept through the admissions process candidates who want to come to attend the institute, and recognizing full well that as we model ourselves as a military college, many of these things are already being spelled out in the various different uniform services where they are accepting of transgender soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and people that are in the National Guard and the Coast Guard and the other components of the services.
Tom and Cedric, this is Ernie. I don't want to speak for any of the members of the Cadet and Military Affairs Committee, but what I'm hearing this morning suggests that we basically have the spring to go from wherever we are today to a finished product, given that there's the possibility that a transgender young person is in the application and admissions phase this year. We want to have time for the administration and the Corps to be prepared to, matriculate that potential cadet come next August. So what I'm hearing is this is going to be kind of a sprint between the briefing from Pat and at the January meeting. And I would say, just I'm throwing a dart out there, but the latest would be June of 2024 to have basically all this locked into place. Is that the way you're seeing it?
So I think as far as the board discussion, you're probably about right on that timeline, Ernie. But I would tell you that the real challenge, at least as I see it, is going to be on the implementation of our policies and procedures. And so this is not an effort that we're starting from scratch on. We started some of this work last year, and it actually picked up on work that was previously started but shelved somewhere around 2018 timeframe. So we've got a good start on this, and I don't know. I haven't tracked coming from the admissions team. Similar to last year. Last year we knew we had a candidate that had identified as transgender. This year I'm not sure that we're tracking anybody as of yet. But there's always the possibility that one will emerge here during the admissions campaign cycle.
Okay,
Tom, I have a, sorry, Ernie.
No, I'm good.
Go ahead, Teddy.
I have a few comments on the board's process here. At the executive committee meeting, we were given a set of policies and procedures that we were told were based on an analysis of the law and on the state's model guidelines. And what became clear is that the proposal that was put forward was not consistent with the state's model guidelines, and the full analysis of the law, that work has not been done. So we were presented with a proposal that's at one end of the spectrum, at one extreme end of the spectrum. I think it'd be a mistake for us in January to either in committee or at the full board to debate what's being proposed in the policy and procedures. What we need to do is we've got to start with an analysis of the law, and we've got to look at a range of options and risk associated with those options, legal risk and risk to changing the nature of VMI and the core. We were not presented with a range of options. We were presented with one option at the extreme end of the range. So when the board takes this up, we need to start with that analysis of the law, the options, the range of options. Then, whether it's in the executive committee or cadet and military affairs, don't look at that policy, look at the issues. You know, there's only a handful of really critical issues here. And the issues really range around where people room, what showers, what locker rooms, what bathrooms they use, what uniforms they wear. And let's discuss how we the board, want to answer those questions. It gets back to, do we want those decisions based on biological sex, or at the other extreme, which is what was being proposed, personal choice on the part of the cadets. So let's take up those issues. Let's look at the options available to us on those issues, the risks associated with it, both legal and operational. And let's provide that feedback to the administration. And then, and only then, talk about a policy and procedures that are consistent with that input.
That's what you're suggesting. I think that to me, Teddy, you and I have talked about this. That was the big takeaway I thought from the executive committee discussion. It wasn't the technical details, but the process details that you're talking about. And that's why I think the whole process was slowed, pulled back. I think you were suggesting, Cedric, start with the critical operational discussion of choices and risks and so forth, obviously layered on with more extensive work on patent and legal front, but starting with, just as you said, Teddy, the operational, hate to say it that way, but the operational component of this decision. Because even as Jim said, and Ernie, there's consequences potentially for both the applicant, but also consequences for the core. And understanding those is critically important. So I don't need to add to that, but I think that's the path I think you see us taking.
Absolutely. And again, so I think just remember how we got to where we are. The first thing is that the work that was done on the draft policy was work that picked up from work that was previously done that was shelved in 2018. Based on what was briefed to me, a lot of that work was going down the path that said, what does the law say and how do we ensure that we comport with the law? Now, certainly things about the law have changed because there continue to be cases that are brought forward. And so, as I understand it, there is a degree of immaturity in terms of the challenges to what the law might say. And I'm not a lawyer, so I rely on the input coming from legal counsel on this particular matter. The other piece is, as I recall, we had put forward a resolution. I operate off of guidance and intent and direction. And we put forth a resolution that would have codified guidance and direction and intent from the board, that it was decided upon that was not the way that the board wanted to go. And so thus we began the work to pick up the work on the existing policy that was being worked, that was shelved back in 2013, reassembled a committee of broad-based community across the Institute, and began to do work on a new draft. As we briefed the XCOM of the draft, and was certainly open to highlighting what the draft said and any changes to the draft, it became a conversation more about whether or not we fully understood what the law said, we understood what the model policy said, on and on and on. So as we approach this particular pattern of what we're going to do, the first piece is, again, to have legal counsel, as Pat is doing the research now, to go through law, existing law, federal law, existing state law, existing cases out there. I think Jim I think John Adams described it as a legal summary, if you will, and to be able to highlight that for the board, and then to lay out various different scenarios with different degrees of risk in terms of the choices that we might make in the shaping of the policy and how we assume more and more graduated risk.
And I think, Pat, you may have a little more say in closed session perhaps on this. Is that?
Yeah, I will. And there's just 2 points I'd like to clarify. Number one, that policy that was advanced by Colonel Bogart, who did most of the work on it. I was asked to opine on it as to whether or not it comported with existing law, which I did. It was a draft policy. It was advanced for the discussion of the board only. It was not there for action. And I don't recall anybody making any representations that it comported with the model policy. The model policy on its face is inapplicable because it applies to K through 12. But we can discuss this during the closed session if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I just want to be sure put the discussion in the right bucket. So
Correct.
yeah, we can come back. Anything else, Cedric, or other than just getting some further feedback from the board?
Subject to any direction or guidance from the board, no.
Okay.
Pat, I just gotta,
I'm sorry.
Pat, I gotta correct you on it. Go back and look at the material that was presented. The preamble, right up front, it said it was consistent with state model guidelines.
Okay, Teddy, we can discuss it during the closed session. How about that?
That's fine. I'll say again, in January, let's forget about the current proposed policy and procedures. Let's look at the law. Let's have that discussion around the work that Pat's going to present to us, and let's start and go from there.
We'll do.
I concur with what Teddy's saying, but I would just add one more thing. As we look at the law, I think VMI is about leadership, and I think we determine what's best for VMI, for the environment that we have outlined very well in our strategic plan, and we do what we feel is right. And if that requires, challenges in the legal system, then we do that. And that's really the only last comment I have.
I think what you're saying, Jim, is when we get down to making decisions, we should have the full range of choices in front of us. And, that's what I think, that's the atmosphere I think, Cedric, you're creating, is the full range of choices. And there's some choices along that range that may involve us taking some risks that frankly, we as a board are prepared to take. And that's let's let that analysis sort of help drive that discussion.
Agreed.
Can I ask for clarification from Pat? Will we get a legal write-up, or are we just going to get a briefing? And if so, when is that estimated to be provided to us?
Gussie, I'm going to prepare a memo on the topic that I will provide to the board in advance of the January meeting, and then a briefing where we can discuss the contents of the memo and any question. I'll entertain any questions that the board may have during the briefing, during closed session.
Thank you.
I just have
Cedric and Tom,
Hey,
have you looked at the policy from the service academies?
Terry, we've looked at a full range of policies. We looked at the Army's transgender policy. We have reached out to at least the Army, not all service academies, but I believe we've reached out to the Army, USMA. We've talked to a number of different organizations, to include state organizations, about their existing policies and or their understanding of the law as they've applied it to their policies.
I just recommend that we look at, all the services and the way they implement it, because there just may be some lessons learned in there
Sure.
on how we could go forward.
Yeah, I failed to mention, we did also look at the DOD's transgender policy, and also that, as we recognize this, Title IX certainly comes into play. And there's an anticipation that there will be some adjustments to Title IX at some point coming from the Biden administration. So all of those things are being looked at.
Sure. I would just, you might want to look at Navy and Marine Corps, how they implement it on ships, because that's you're talking about, making major changes on, so that's just my recommendation.
It's a good idea, Terry. Anything else from any of the board members? But again, maybe we'll touch a little bit in closed session, the legal piece, if people have an interest in going down that path, Pat.
Sure.
But otherwise, a lot of more work to be done. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to Gussie's point, I really appreciate, Pat, our conversation, the ability for us to digest that stuff in advance of the board meeting. I just think it'll make for a more meaningful board meeting, getting in writing ahead of time. So I appreciate that.
Will do. Anything further? If not, Cedric, maybe we'll move on to the next, the item, the athletics department.
Sure. And so the next topic is on an update on the athletic budget. There have been a series of sessions that have taken place as we began to recognize that both in terms of our athletic budget, that based on the budgeting forecast, we were beginning to find ourselves in a situation where we potentially could be operating in a budget deficit for the athletic budget. I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of members, to include the board, on a couple of occasions with respect to athletics here at VMI, and this is intended up front to try to reiterate the value and the importance of athletics here at VMI that I believe has been well understood for a number of decades, and the recognition that over the decades, there have been times when analysis has been done, studies have been done to highlight an ever-present and continuing effort where we are challenged with our athletic budget. You can go as far back as 1975, and you can come as far forward as 2022 to recognize that routinely the Institute has to grapple with challenges to our athletic budget. Some of the documents that I read highlight the fact that going as far back as 1992, it was well recognized that when it came to how we competed, consistent with how we were budgeted, we were getting a certain type of outcome from our Division I athletic program because we were fairly consistent in how we funded our athletic programs. We were probably only about 2 to 4% off in terms of funding compared to the average 1AA school. But over time, the first slide, please. Over time, statements have been made by various different institute leaders, to include institute superintendents, about the value and the importance of athletics. And so this first slide is really intended to just kind of reiterate those words. These words don't come from me. These words come from prior administrations about the importance of cadets participating in athletics, the value that athletics brings, and how, if you're going to talk about the VMI spirit, a lot of that is centered around what we do in athletics, our success and our pursuits, and the fact that we give college athletes an experience here at VMI that has a significant impact on the overall morale and value to the core, along with other sporting activities through club sports. Next slide. And so these are my words. Number one, I think we need to be thinking about how we can support an effort that will allow our Division I athletes to compete to win. And I've talked about this through a number of discussions in board sessions. I've talked to the KeyDeck Club members about this and what it means to compete to win, as opposed to trying to make do with what we have. And the fact that there's a strong correlation between how you fund athletics and the results that you get from funding athletics appropriately. And the recognition of where we sit right now in terms of athletics at VMI. We are at the very bottom in terms of operational dollars when it comes to VMI athletics compared to the other conference teams. There is a recognition that among the Southern Conference teams, we have the most, or we're at the very top when it comes to the number of athletic programs. But the real question is, what do we want an athletic program for VMI to be? You can't treat VMI athletics like a call center. If you do, then you're going to get the results that we're getting, and it's going to be focused simply on how do you make the most with the meager amount of resources that you get for athletics. And that's not to say that we don't get substantial funding. The resources that we get are significant. However, they don't allow us to keep up from a competitive standpoint with our other SOCON competitors. And you see that where it says that we remain approximately $5 million behind the average funding for SOCON competitors. Next slide.
General Wins, can I ask about that $5 million?
Sure.
Is that on like a per athlete basis? Seems like it's maybe the total program basis, but I feel like there might be a little bit of difference based on, you know, student population, like what kind of facilities we have. Like, can you just tease that out a little bit?
Sure. And I'll say something and I'll let Jim expand. I think that $5 million deficit is essentially a roll-up. Certainly it varies from team to team. But I think on average, what we're saying is that $5 million, when you take the total operational budget size of athletic programs in other schools in our conference, that's where we land.
Right. It is a operational dollar comparison, and it's a gross spending. So you are, I think the intent of your question is correct. We have a smaller group. Our per athlete costs would be better, show us better light than the gross dollars. That is a gross dollars for operational costs.
Is that an annual deficit?
Yes.
Terry, so just to make sure I understand your question, the $5 million is the delta or the difference between what we fund annually versus what other colleges fund. Does that answer your question? Because it's not necessarily a deficit, it is a gap between how we fund athletics versus what other schools in our conference are funding their athletic programs.
Well, I guess the question is, is our objective that we're going to have to make up $5 million every year to get to, level playing ground?
So the objective that we're looking at right now is to bring our athletic funding in balance with our budget. So in other words, we are operating based on coming out of COVID. We are operating somewhere between $1 to $2 million, I believe. If we operate and do nothing over the next couple of years with our budget, we'll be operating somewhere, we'll run a deficit of about $1 to $2 million. And so this effort is intended, and the strategies that we will employ is intended to bring our budget back in line. But the further conversation that we need to have as a board, as a VMI community, is whether or not there's a commitment to the athletic experience here at VMI such that we can provide the funding where we would be closer to that average of what other schools spend on their athletic programs.
And can I just give one quick follow-up? Sure. As far as cost per, the original question about cost per athlete. Remember, just because a school has 15,000 students rather than 1,500 students, the number of your athletes are going to be approximately the same with the same number of sports. So larger schools don't have double or triple the number of athletes. We're very similar in the number of athletes that a UT Chattanooga might have, or an East Tennessee State might have. So the difference, the $5 million delta is a realistic number.
Okay. Next slide. And so that lack of funding shows in performance. This pyramid of success chart is here intended to just kind of highlight that. And so if you look at our 7-year conference performance, what you see is that among our 18 teams, we have, over the last 7 years, finished in the top third of the conference one time.
Annually.
Over the last 7 years, we finished in the middle third of the conference 7 times. And then among our 18 sports teams, we finished in the bottom third of the conference 10 times over the last 7 years. And so again, the question is that where we want to be? Is that acceptable given the history of athletics at VMI and the understanding that there is a direct correlation between how you commit and how you fund athletics and the value that student athletes who perform very well here academically and are the recruited right athletes, the experience that they want. Next. And so with respect to the current athletic budget, again, as I said earlier, if we don't take any steps coming out of COVID, we would project that we would run a deficit of about $1.2 million. And that is an annual deficit?
Yes.
That's an annual deficit of $1.2 million. The question has been asked a number of times, okay, how did we get here? All right, well, what you'll see is that the biggest drivers to that projected deficit are borne out by the fact that over the last 3 years, we have received from the state, which was applied to both the A&P and the classified workforce, 5% increases for 2 consecutive years, and then now a 7% increase for this year. As we make those decisions about employee compensation changes within the A&P, the administrative and the professional, and the classified workforce that are state employees, we have made a conscious decision to make sure that we have provided similar type of increases to the athletic department workforce. We've been certainly helped over the last couple of years when it comes to football coaches' salaries with the coaches' compensation fund, which has been funded through donor giving. But the successive increases in 5%, 5%, and 7% over the last 3 years has resulted in a deficit in a delta in the budget of about $900,000. Reduced in enrollment, certainly over the last 2 years, we experienced the enrollment shortfall of about 125 cadets in the class of 2026. And then before that, we experienced high attrition coming right out of COVID with the class of 2025. As we are continuing to work through our admissions efforts with this year's class of 491 and an anticipated class based on a goal of 495 for next year, we will be able to recover in terms of the reduced enrollment shortfalls to the athletic budget that are brought on by the athletic fees that are paid by those students. We'll recover that. The third component was the indirect cost increase that occurred over 1 year as we came out of COVID again. For the balance of the COVID period, we didn't charge auxiliary fees to the athletic department or any of the other auxiliaries. And as we came out of COVID, there was an adjustment to the calculation of how you calculate indirect costs that caused a significant increase in the fees that would be charged to the athletic department, which I've asked Dallas Clark and his team to go into and look at and see whether or not there are adjustments that could be made to those indirect costs. But be that as it may, that's another contributing factor to the projected budget shortfall. Next.
A question, on that last slide.
Yes.
About the fund balance. The athletic fund balance, at this rate of deficit, at what point will the fund balance be zero? Will it be gone?
We will exhaust, there'll be a small portion of the fund balance or carry forward still into fiscal 24, but largely in fiscal 24, this next year, it will be zeroed out. In fact, we'll start running the negative balances.
You'll see at the bottom note there, we project is that although we have a $1.2 million deficit, the fund balance can be used to reduce that to about 300,000. But as Dallas just mentioned, that's it. I mean, it will be at less than zero.
Yeah,
So essentially, it's gone this year.
it's gone.
That's correct.
Gone this year, and I misspoke the years. Fiscal year 25, we'll start with that 300,000, which will not be adequate to balance the fiscal year 25 athletic budget.
And do you know offhand where that fund balance peaked in the last few years?
I believe it's 2.2 million. Is that about right, Dallas?
Would have peaked during the COVID years, just right about probably the end of fiscal year 22, about 2.2 million.
And
Okay, thank you.
How much did it grow during the COVID years? Do you recall?
Let me run down and grab some sheets. I don't recall.
All right.
Pretty significant increases because we have those indirect cost charges.
Correct.
So we're able to bring those balances forward.
Okay. All right. Next slide. So I asked Jim Miller and his team to take a look at some various different strategies that we could do to bring, again, the budget back into alignment. Okay, so the guidance that I gave them was to come up with strategies that would allow the athletic department to fix itself internally without us turning to the KeyDed Club and asking them to provide additional funding to bring the current budget back into balance. But again, as I said, the larger conversation as we move forward and as we implement some or all of these strategies, the larger conversation needs to be about what fundraising, in addition to these strategies, can be accomplished to bring our overall operational budget in line with or somewhere closer to the average of the conference competitors that we have so that we can get better performance out of our athletic programs. So the strategies that they came up with are highlighted on the next 3 slides. The first is reflected in the one titled Athletic Department Cost Cutting and Revenue Increases. And you see that there are 3 proposals that were made by the athletic department: increasing football, basketball, and annual ticket revenues, increasing guaranteed game revenues, and prioritizing and managing team operating costs. The second is a corporate sales and advertising strategy, which we have had on the books for some time, a position for someone who actively goes out and solicits and generates corporate sales. That position has been unfilled for a number of years. I think Jim and the team have already gotten an advertisement out and are taking in candidates to see who might best fill that position. And then the third is what I directed Dallas Clark and his team to do, which is to review the calculations of the indirect costs. The change in the indirect costs from a budgeting perspective has been pretty significant in a 1-year increase of about $300K, as I showed in the earlier slide. And so we just want to understand how that occurred and whether or not there are things that can be done to adjust the indirect cost that gets billed to the athletic department. In these first 3 proposals, to be clear, there are no staff cuts to the athletic department workforce. If you look at the average SoCon staffing within athletic departments, on average, it's about 33 personnel that are non-coaching staff. And if you look at VMI, we currently sit at 20 people doing the work of what on average 33 people do in the other athletic departments. It might entail the not filling a couple of coaching staff positions. Presently, there's one identified coaching staff position that we would not fill among our 18 sports teams.
Senator, I don't want to push you a little bit, but we have a lot of
Sure.
closed session we need to
Sure.
get to. Actually,
Absolutely.
I just don't want to lose people when we
Absolutely.
get into the closed session.
The second chart just provides what the strategies are. So an athletic fee increase. Presently, right now, the state requires us to increase athletic fees no higher than, I believe, 3%. The proposal would be whether we would explore going to the state and requesting that they allow us to increase them by a higher amount. This is not unprecedented. I think it's been done before. However, that is one of the strategy recommendations that I have decided to hold off on, although I have directed that we explore what the potential ramifications might be in terms of additional funding and so on and so forth. We would use some of the superintendent's discretionary account to help bring into balance the athletic budget fund balance for a short period of time. We would talk to the KeyDeck Club and get them to work with athletics to revise the fundraising model, which currently is heavily weighted towards scholarship and not towards operational dollars. And we've had ongoing conversations with the KeyDeck Club about that. And then we would conduct quarterly budget reviews of the athletic budget to see what progress we're making towards this end. Next slide. And so, again, just to kind of bring us back to how we started. I believe that athletics is an important part of VMI's culture. I think that private fundraising must support competing to win, not just making do with what we have. And that there's a direct relationship to competitiveness and how we fund our athletic programs and the experience that we're able to provide to our student athletes who all come here and immerse themselves as members of the Corps, as student athletes, and as young men and women who achieve academic excellence, just like every other member of the Corps. And then you see the 7 strategies that were laid out. I approved all but the athletic fee increase, and then the revised fundraising model is an ongoing discussion between the athletic department, Deputy Superintendent FNS, and the KeyDeck Club leadership. Subject to any questions.
General, we had a discussion back in May about at the board meeting about all this and the financial crisis associated with this. How much impact are all these strategies having on reducing the expenses in this fiscal year?
Jim, can you answer that?
I know that we look long-term that if we're successful in these strategies, that within the 2-year period of time, we looked at where it being balanced and then being on the net positive after that. In this current year, looking at I would say to be realistic in this current year, I can't see substantial differences in we're projected to be approximately $300,000 in the red by using the fund balance on a $16 million budget. There are some positive things going on. I haven't looked at the last numbers going into the final home game. We were $25,000 up on football ticket sales. There's some positive things going forward. but I couldn't say that, there's significant changes in this year's budget that would attack that $300,000 projected deficit.
So Teddy, I think the direct answer to your question is that for this year, we have not implemented any adjustments to the athletic department budget. However, what Jim is saying is that based on current execution, it looks like measures are taking place where some budgeted items may not result in full expenditure of each line item that is budgeted. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on the athletic budget or strategy? Again, this will be a recurring topic, I think, actually. So we know that it's you know, we've got work to do, but we'll keep it front and center with the board and the athletics committee that they month. If there's no other questions, I'm going to take the steps to move us into closed session, but let me just ask again if there's any further before we do.
Tom?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
We're trying to move it along here, but just in case anybody's interested, in the admissions numbers, I've been getting reports from Colonel Hagee, and he's putting those in the box thing we were using before we started on board. And just in case he hasn't, I encourage everybody to take a look at those. He puts them in every week. And just in case anybody's curious, we've got just over 1,000 applicants as opposed to 500 at this time last year. We've got 430 conditional appointments as opposed to 280 at this time last year, and 17 deposits compared to 4 at this time last year. And again, those are put in into our box depository every week.
Good. Yeah, Gussie, thanks.
There's a link to those in the portal at the top of your dashboard page.
Good. Gussie, thanks for bringing that to our attention, because as we know, we saw some great progress last year, but it needed to be sustainable. So thank you, because it's proving so far to be very sustainable. Anything?
Tom, I just wanted to also congratulate Jim and the Institute on a great football season, 5 and 6 overall, 4 and 4 in the conference.
Yeah,
it's really great.
With one asterisk next to the one of those wins, right? A hue that means more than others, so it gets counted more than once.
Right.
That's good. All right, if there's no other comments, I'm going to take the steps. Pat, go ahead.
I have another open session comment to make, and in the objectives and in the strategic plan and in some of our discussions before, we've talked about improving strategic communication and marketing efforts. We've talked about this, but we really haven't done anything on it. And I think it would make a lot of sense for us to hire outside help, an outside PR firm or media relations specialist to help guide us in our efforts. We have made mistakes along the way, certainly. We've talked about some of them. We've talked about engaging alumni and cadets publicly. We've spent countless time talking about the efforts this past summer with the cadet newspaper. And out of that, there's been at least 11 negative articles written. And there still amazingly hasn't been any admission that was, in hindsight, even just a mistake, a bad maneuver. But I would argue that if we had a third party guiding us, we would make fewer of these mistakes. And when we make them, we would learn from them and get better. So I'd like to see that be part of the efforts around the enhanced strategic and communication and marketing efforts in the strategic plan.
Okay.
I concur with that 100%. I think there's a lot of good that is going on that we don't capitalize on. And, you know, the team there at VMI is very challenged. I mean, in terms of the effect of the internet and how media has changed over the years, it's become far more challenging. And, you know, our organic resources are somewhat limited. So I think this would be a very good move. I think it would be, and you know, I've talked to Bill Wyatt about it also, and I believe he concurs. And I don't want to speak for you, Bill. You'll have to speak up, but that this would be helpful for the team in Lexington and us overall.
And this is John. I think everybody already knows my view on this. I bang this drum all the time. I just think we have such an incredibly special but unique brand, and to have somebody not short term, right, but to have somebody long term who can help us across all the different medium, right, to get our message out, to be coordinated, to be consistent. I mean, the benefits, I just am so confident of this. The benefits are gonna transcend everything, right? They're gonna recruiting, athletics, fundraising, you know, just our kids getting hired. I mean, we have such a special place, and it can't be like, okay, we're going to do 1 year contract with some company. We need somebody to come in and actually get to know us. We need somebody to be there on a beautiful fall parade weekend and spend time with our alumni, and spend time with our cadets, and spend time with the staff there in Lexington, so that they can convey effective message across all of this. So I'll pile on that. I'm a huge
I got a curiosity question, because I know we've been talking a lot about budget. Typically, how much does something like that cost for what we're, you know, again, like I said, a ballpark figure?
Yeah, so
I
let's.
think it's go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to actually say I don't know, but we have undertaken efforts to begin to understand, number one, where our holes are from a marketing perspective. We're in the process of bringing on a consulting group to give us a good, thorough assessment of where those holes might be. And then Bill Wyatt has put together a strategic comms plan for the year and the subsequent years that would incorporate us going out and finding a marketing agency. But we want to better understand kind of where the gaps are. There's a lot of information that goes out, both from the Institute and from the agencies. But we might not be hitting the right targets. There are efforts where we clearly are missing. And so we want to be thoughtful and get about doing it the right way. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of numbers, but it is definitely something we're looking at. And my intent would be that we have something in place here before the next academic year.
And maybe for the board members, this has been a reoccurring issue, and I share everyone's concern about us not getting the story out as positively as it should be. I'll work with Cedric after this meeting and figure out what's the right schedule to bring it to, maybe first even use as the executive committee as a sounding board. Cedric, you and I can kind of compare notes on what's the right way to do that, and be sure, you know, we've got the right sense of urgency about this too. So appreciate everybody bringing that up.
So Lester, you're, you know, just a rough numbers, but we're probably talking six figures for a company, a professional company, to come in, do an assessment, and put together a proposal, and then move forward with that. No, one would expect that in subsequent years it would probably be less than that, but you know, this is a classic situation of where we've got so much to offer. VMI is such an amazing experience for anyone that goes there, and it's a situation where you gotta spend money to make money, and that's
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree that marketing is huge. I've just from my business personally, I'm seeing summer numbers in the fall because I've engaged a individual to do my social media stuff. But even for my little business, it's been relatively expensive. I've seen the dividends, but as we, you know, I keep hearing this steady drumbeat about budget. When you're talking about, like you said, if you get up into six-figure, numbers, do we, without, like I say, kind of like what General Wynn's saying, assess exactly what we need and what we don't need, I think we put even more pressure on this budget situation. So that was my concern. Like I say, kind of two competing narratives. One is the budget is bad, and two is putting six figures towards the marketing front.
And you're probably looking at closer to seven figures.
And to be clear, this past year, we did get on the path to adding an external marketing component to our efforts. But if you recall, it was targeted, it was focused on our admissions and recruiting efforts. And so we did see a good return on that in terms of the boost that we think we got as a result of that with the numbers that we were able to bring in. So now is the time for us to just kind of broaden that and see where the additional holes are, and then how we incorporate that across the institute as a whole.
Again, a good discussion. We'll consider, spend some time to figure out what's the right way to continue to keep the committees and the board involved actually in that process. So I'm not trying to push this, except we've got some important discussions in closed session. So unless someone objects, I'm going to move us into closed session. At this time, it's 10:32. I entertain a motion that the board go into a closed session to discuss one, matters relating to the employment, assignment, appointment, or performance of specific public officers, appointees, or employees, and evaluation of performance of departments or schools of public institutions of higher education pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A1, relating to the superintendent's performance review and of special staff and the evaluation of specific departmental operations. Secondly, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A7 pertaining to actual or probable litigation of the Institute. And thirdly, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to VA Code Section 2.2-3711A8. And I'll need a motion to move into a closed session.
So moved.
Perfect. I heard a second there too. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We are in closed session, but we do need to cut off, I think, Matt, the outside participants. Bill, you taking care of that? And you'll let us know when we're clear.
Yes, sir. Stand by. just stand by while everybody else is moving into the back end of the open session room. Okay, Mr. Watson, I believe we are good to go. Looks like you are.
Bill, you can hear us and we're all good?
Yes, sir. I think we're all good.
Okay. I'm just gonna move us back into open session. The closed session has ended and the board is now in open session. It is now 11:41. During its closed meeting, the board discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And only those public business matters identified in the motion convening the board in closed session. I'm going to ask for a motion to certify the closed session. Someone move?
So moved.
Or second?
Second.
Thank you. And I think, Bill, if you could, we need to do a roll call vote. So you've probably got a better view on who's on the call at this point.
Yes, sir. So this is a roll call vote to certify the closed session. Mr. Adams. Okay, Mr. Edgar, he left. Mr. Fain.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia.
Aye.
Mr. Gottwald.
Aye.
Mr. Inman.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Joustra.
Aye.
Miss Lord.
Aye.
Mr. Marsh.
Aye.
Admiral McKnight had to leave early. Miss Phillips.
Aye.
General Ring. Miss Todd.
Aye.
And Mr. Watson.
Aye. All right, so Bill, we're now
Williams.
Damon.
Sorry,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson. Mr. Williams.
Got it.
and Lester too.
That's everyone, sir.
Was Lester on there too? I'm sorry, Bill. Did you call Lester?
Yeah, he got me, Tom.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Good. Well, again, I think we're back in open session. Again, an awful lot covered in closed session. So good discussion. One item requiring a vote would be a vote of the superintendent's objectives for this upcoming year, which we had a great discussion in the closed session on. And I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Good. Then the motion.
Objection, but I'll abstain for the same
Yeah.
reason.
Oh, yeah, Kate, absolutely. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think with that, the objectives are in place. As we know the follow-up, we'll have a discussion at the January meeting and we'll work towards that. Just a couple quick lighter items, actually. One, just so everyone's aware, the Marshall Foundation has the Andrew Goodpaster Award event in Washington tomorrow. And General P will be recognized. So it's another great opportunity for VMI to be visible and an opportunity for us to be with General P. So Cedric, you and I and others will be there, I think, as part of that ceremony. And I don't think you have any official capacity there, but being present and being sure VMI is well represented is very important. The other thing is I will work with Bill Wyatt on a piece that just sort of sets the stage for the discussion we had around the strategic plan. I think, as we all know, it's more than just a plan. It's also the basis for fundraising and things like that. So I've not had a chance to do too much with Bill on that point, but I think we all recognize it's a great, back to Teddy's point, it's a great marketing opportunity. One of the many great opportunities. And so I'll work with Bill on getting something out in the next day or so related to the strategic plan approval. So with that, any other business, anything I missed? Anything, Cedric, last from you as closing comments?
No, sir. We will be prepared for January, the January board meeting.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, if not, I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
I hear a second in there too, and I'm gathering there's no objection. So with that, thank you, everybody. And as you said earlier, I think, Conrad, we may not be together again until after the holidays. So everybody have an enjoyable holiday and a safe period. So thank you all.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay. Bye.